Having been a great lover of the Go-Betweens music for many years, since I in fact heard the record I'm going to play now and was pulled up short by it back then when I was a kid, and still am every time I play it. Then in about 2009, when I read his brilliant book, The 10 Rules of Rock and Roll, I realised that Robert Forster of the Go-Betweens is also a consummate writer, and that is proved by a new book called Grant and I, Inside and Outside the Go-Betweens. It's a beautiful and lovely book about his relationship with Grant McLennan and the wonderful band the Go-Betweens, and I shall be talking to Robert when we have heard the aforementioned and still thrillingly wonderful Cattle and Cane. Tim Merchant says, I was recently on holiday in northern Queensland, driving past endless fields of cane, listening to this beautiful song. I love the Go-Betweens. It is a wonderful song. I remember, whenever I was in my late teens, hearing that song and being pulled up short by that line about his father's watch. He left it in the showers. And Robert Forster joins me now from Brisbane. Hello, Robert.
Hello, Stuart. How are you?
I'm very well, Robert, and thank you so much for taking the time to join us. You say in Grant and I beg your pardon, which is a wonderful book, you say that there was so much great stuff pouring out of Grant at that point that you initially missed what a great song that was.
That's true. He was, Grant at that time was writing a lot of really good guitar riffs and bits of songs, and some of them he was finishing. So when he played me Cattle and Cane the first time, there was no lyric. And so what I was hearing were the bones of the song, that guitar riff that goes all the way through. So I sort of thought it was a really great guitar riff. But then once Grant put, the lyric to it, and as you say, like the father's watch lost, in the shower. It was just, and the fact that it was really the most autobiographical song that Grant had written up to that point, and he hadn't written really anything like it. So, besides being a stunning piece of music, he then sort of sprung a lyric on myself and Lindy, our drummer. That was just really unique and a wonderful surprise. Yeah,
your book is wonderful about your growing up in Brisbane. I remember once that old cliche about Australia, the lucky country. I once asked Nick Cave about this. I do sometimes feel when I read about childhoods like yours that there seems some real truth in that it does seem to be a very genial and lovely place to have grown up. You seem to evoke your youth very warmly.
Yeah, I do. It was a very sort of straightforward life in a way. Like with my own particular family, we didn't move around. We were in the suburbs, and it was quite like a green suburb. It was quite idyllic. It was subtropical climate. Like Australia is an island, so there's not sort of war on your doorstep, and it's you do get a very good run with childhood in Australia, and a lot of people like moved to Australia. A lot of people from the UK and Europe moved to Australia to bring up their children. Because it has a reputation of being fairly idyllic, Yeah.
That song Cattle and Cane, by the way, written by you and Grant, was selected as one of the top 30 Australian songs of all time. Is there a certain amount of quiet pride in that?
Oh, definitely. It is. And I can tell you the other 29 were massive hits probably, where Cattle and Cane, except to people that knew it and loved it, it went sort of under the radar. Like if you look at the other songs on on that list, it's probably people like In Excess, like people that were or that would be known here in Australia by virtually everyone, and a lot of people around the world would know some of those songs. Friday on My Mind by the Easy Beats or something like that. So Cattle and Cane did go under the radar, but it's lasted, and listening to it now as you played it, it's a very, very mysterious record. You can't really think of many other things that sound like it.
No, nothing. That was initially to me when I thought I've heard nothing like this record before, and that elusive quality of what is it quite about? It's mysterious, it's romantic, and the book is wonderful, and I want people to read the book, so I won't plod methodically through it. But let's pick out a few key points. You meet Grant in EN 103 in an English class, yeah?
Yeah. We were at Queensland University, and this is in 1975. And so we were both like art students, like doing arts degrees. But I think that we were basically, the only two people doing arts degrees who were doing it not to end up as teachers or have a career in mind. We were doing it. We were looking, we were searching for things. We didn't have a profession lined up at the end. And I think, so the radar went up, and we were sort of open to each other and receptive, and we just sensed something in each other that clicked.
You say in the book that if a film were to be made of Grant and I, it would begin with this one particular scene with you driving, age 20 and 21 respectively, to rescue your first single. You're going down to the pressing plant, I think. Is that right?
That's true. We recorded our first single in Brisbane, which is called Lee Remick and Karen. So there was recording studios in Brisbane, but there was no pressing plant in Brisbane. So you had to send your tape by mail or express down to Sydney, which was, is 1,000, about 800 miles away. And so you just sort of sent it off, and you didn't know if you're really going to see that tape ever again. And so after a couple of weeks, and we wanted 500 copies made. Yeah. And so we were phoning up the pressing plant, and on a couple of calls, people couldn't really tell us where that tape was, but they knew it was somewhere in the pressing plant. Wow. And so Grant and I just decided that we'd drive down and actually front up to the pressing plant and just go, look, we're here. We sent you the tape. It was a long way to go, but that's how much we believed in what we're doing. God. And we really wanted that record made. And so we had to drive the 800 miles down to make sure that the record got done.
That's amazing. And of course, that record, I guess, is what attracts the attention of, as you put it, three weird guys from Postcard Records.
Well, it is. It's, John Peel played it. Right. And so we sent a copy to him from Australia. He played it. And so when Orange Juice, with their manager Alan Horn, was starting Postcard in 1980, which is 2 years after the record came out, they walked into Rough Trade down in London, Rough Trade shop, and they'd heard Lee Remick and Karen on John Peel, and then they saw the single was up on the wall, and so they actually sort of said in the shop, wow, there's the Go-Between single. I wonder whatever happened to them, because that was 2 years ago. Unfortunately, this is luck for the Go-Betweens. The person working behind the counter was an Australian woman called Judy Crichton, who knew who we were, and her husband had brought the records over to London, so she could tell Edwin Collins, David McClymont, and Alan Horn exactly where we were in London, and so we ended up on Postcard.
You did with, I think that record. I think is it Lee Remick, I Need Two Heads, which is I think one of the most collectible things on Postcard Records.
It is. I think everything's collectible on Postcard Records, but yes, it's true.
And again, do you think now, Robert, looking back, that period, I certainly do, but maybe that's the nostalgia of being the perfect age at the time, it seemed a glorious time for me for pop music, for a certain kind of literate and thoughtful and adventurous pop music. Do you think that's true?
Are you talking about the early 80s, late 70s?
Yeah. Yeah,
I do. I mean, I'm a firm believer that I think a lot more interesting music and music that I loved came from post-punk than came from punk. There's a lot of punk stuff that I liked, but I think from about 1978 to about 1982 was a real golden period where it was the step after punk, and people still with a lot of enthusiasm made a lot of really good records. And it felt like at the time, to me, a great record or a great couple of records was coming out every week. That's how I was being bombarded with stuff that was coming. And Cattle and Cane just sort of felt like, well, if we were going to make our mark amidst, this time in 1982, 83, you had to come up with something really good and, really unique.
Yeah,
you know?
I completely agree. I think that's completely right. It was the stuff that came in the wake of punk. I think that was the really interesting stuff. We, of course, have to acknowledge that there is a sad end to the book in Grant's sad, tragic, shocking death in his late 40s. And you write very candidly, and there was a line that jumped out at me when you talk about, you said the shadow that hung over him was the sour condition of his soul. Could you say a little more about that?
Well, that's a tough one. He wasn't happy, right. And that was really at the core of it. I also mentioned in the book there was he suffered from depression, and he tried to, cope with it through alcohol, and Grant, he just wasn't a content person. He hadn't found a private life that matched the brilliance of his work. He was a great artist, but an unhappy person. Yeah. And that happens quite a lot with artists and singer-songwriters, and that was his lot in a way.
We're going to finish with a song called Bachelor Kisses, which comes from a period, I think in the book, you've been whisked off. You've become pop stars and you've been whisked off to the south of France to hang out in places where Wham and John Anderson hang out. Is that right?
That's right. We go from poverty in London and suddenly we're in the south of France, and we're sleeping in bungalows that a couple of weeks later we see in photo shoots for Wham. Wow. And we record our third album, and Bachelor Kisses was the single. Well,
I'm going to play that now, and I'm going to tell everyone who's interested both in pop music and in great writing, because it's such a wonderfully written book, Robert. Robert Forster's Grant and I, Inside and Outside the Go-Betweens. And just on a personal level, I want to say, you were the second, you won't remember this, of course, but it's emblazoned on my mind, you were the second interview I ever did for the New Musical Express when I was a cub reporter there. It was all about Eve, and then you. And I met you in an upstairs room, the four of you in London, in, I guess, about 1988, 89, and you were incredibly generous and courteous to me, and I've never forgotten that.
Oh, no, that's very sweet of you to say that. Well, you've probably got us on a good day, but no, that's great. That really makes me happy. No.
It's a lovely book, Robert. Thank you for taking this. I know it's late with you. Thank you for taking the time to stay up and do this.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Bye, Robert.
Bye-bye.
You'd have to have a heart of stone not to love the Go-Betweens, wouldn't you? Don't believe what you've heard. Faithful's not a bad word. What a lyric, what a song, what a band to Ian Salmon. There is so much love coming in for Robert and that little chat we had. That I'll save some of it for a little bit later. But Earl of Thorgear says, what a great bloke and what stunning songs. How lovely hearing Robert. S.J. Walsh says, lovely to hear Robert Forster discussing the Go-Betweens. I'm looking forward to reading the book, says Stephen Holt. This is a particularly nice one. Shona Gibbs says, what a lovely touching interview with Robert Forster. I don't know the Go-Betweens at all, but now my interest is more than peaked. Oh, you have some wonderful stuff to discover, Shona. Culture. Never been wrong, Waxahachie. Just a little few follow-ups on Robert Forster. What a lovely man, says Annie listening in London. Bachelor Kisses was the intro for me to them. Now I'm a lifelong fan. Bert liked it as well. Oh my God, how nice was Robert Forster, wasn't he? Lovely to hear Robert Forster on the radio. Me and them boyfriend went to see them in Glasgow. We knew, just before we went to New York City to get married, we knew they would be in New York City, and we asked if they'd be our witnesses. They didn't say no, but we didn't quite manage it. And we saw them the night we got married. Perfect. That's from Sarah Gordon and Sam. Phil Campbell in York says, thrilled to hear Robert Forster is with you today. The Go-Betweens are a peak of musical evolution, he says. Let me tell you, if you're in the UK, Grant and I is out now, and it's well worth reading. And Robert is over here in Manchester on the 13th of September when he's doing an event at the Anthony Burgess Foundation.
This is BBC Radio 6 Music.